The first UFC pay-per-view in England since UFC 204 is signed, sealed and delivered. In a pay-per-view which has a lot of hype coming into it, UFC 286 was a pay-per-view for the ages, being headlined by the homecoming champ Leon Edwards in his much anticipated trilogy fight with Kamaru Usman. With 3 banger UFC events to start the year already, UFC 286 had tough work to keep up with the amazing streak of UFC pay-per-views going. So was it able to live up to the hype and keep the streak of amazing UFC pay-per-views going? Let's find out. This is the Fight Franchise and the recap and review of UFC 286. The early prelims featured 6 fights with varying results and performances. The card opened with Veronica Hardy vs Juliana Miller, fought in a back and forth fight with Hardy dropping Miller and also the fight going to the ground with Miller trying to land a submission. Overall, Veronica Hardy won the unanimous decision in a great back and forth fight. Jai Herbert fought Ludwig Klein in a back and forth fight which Herbert got the better of him in most of the first 2 rounds. The third round would see Herbert land 2 illegal nut shots, which ended up him getting a point deduction. The fight would be a majority draw, which was unfortunate for Herbert, who fought well. Joanne Wood fought Luana Carolina in a great fight which would see them fight back and forth in some very close rounds. The fight would be a split decision with Joanne Wood getting the win. Jake Hadley had a great fight and an excellent performance, making quick work of Malcolm Gordon. He would put pressure on Gordon and land a brutal body shot, which dropped Gordon, and he would land the finishing shots to secure the excellent TKO victory. Hadley would call out British rival Mohamed Mokaev. Let's see what happens going forward for Hadley. Hot prospect Christian Leroy Duncan fought Duskro Todorovic in what was a 1-round fight, in a fight which saw some heavy leg kicks as both guys fought back and forth. Eventually Duncan pushed Todorovic up against the cage and tried to secure the takedown. Todorovic reversed the position and then shockingly dropped to the canvas. Todorovic injured his knee and Duncan secured the stoppage win. Lerone Murphy and Gabriel Santos fought in a fun fight which saw both men scrap in a great fight which was back and forth. This fight saw back and forth striking and submission attempts when the fight hit the ground, with Santos trying to secure an armbar. The fight would be very close, but Lerone Murphy would win the split decision victory. These early prelims were very good fun and saw some amazing results and fun fights. The prelims began with one of the biggest prospects on the current UFC roster, Mohamed Mokaev, who faced off against Rafael Filho, in what ended up being more competitive than fans first thought, with Mokaev facing real adversity and showing his heart. Mokaev would dominate the first round, and then the round after, Filho was more competitive. The third round, Mokaev would be dominant again, but in transitions in the grappling, Filho would get Mokaev in a knee bar, extending Mokaev's leg out with his knee being torn apart. Mokaev grimaced and fought through the pain and got out of the submission. Following this, Mokaev would get the back of Filho and secured the choke. Right after the fight finished, Mokaev was struggling to walk, showing how deep the submission was. Mokaev has had a brilliant streak, but he needs to recover from some injuries, as his trajectory is amazing, but the fights only get harder from here. As a fan of his who wants to see him win the bout, he needs to slow down just a bit on his career. But if he has dreams of becoming the youngest UFC champion of all time, he needs to risk it all and go for it, and hopefully we see him become champion one day soon. The fight after this was a brutal fight which had some wild scenes after the fight finished. Yanal Azmouz fought a hot prospect in Sam Patterson, who was a huge favourite going into the fight. Patterson was the much bigger and rangier guy in the octagon, but that didn't matter, as Azmouz would shoot a takedown and level change, but would come up throwing a huge hook which dropped Patterson and then would land vicious ground strikes, bouncing Patterson's head off the canvas, with the ref stepping in. This saw after the fight Patterson trying to fight and argue with Mark Goddard, as he didn't know where he was or what happened. This was a brilliant debut, and going forward, Azmouz could have a brilliant career. Chris Duncan fought Omar Morales in a back and forth fight which was ultra competitive. The fight went all 3 rounds and would go to the judges' scorecard. The scorecard would be all over the place, with Duncan getting the nod. Overall, this was a competitive fight, and let's hope we see some more from Duncan going forward. The final fight of the prelims was between Jack Shaw and Makwa Amirkhani, who is a fighter who always ends up fighting on the London cards. The first round saw Amirkhani dominate with the grappling for the most part, with Jack Shaw having some success. The second round saw Amirkhani much more tired, which saw him struggling on the feet and with the grappling. Jack Shaw would eventually get on top of a tired Amirkhani and get his back and secure the rear naked choke win. This would bring the end of some decent prelims with some great finishes, showing off some future stars of some of the smaller divisions in the men's weight classes. The main card featured some ultra competitive back and forth fights, which in some cases were super close. The card opened with a huge fight at the top of an ultra-competitive and stacked middleweight division with Marvin Vettori facing Roman Dolidze. The fight was fought purely on the feet with huge strikes going back and forth, with Dolidze putting on the pressure and pushing the pace, with Vettori using brilliant counter-striking. It seemed in most cases the first round was Dolidze's and the second round was Vettori's. The final round was super close and the fight would go to the judges' scorecard. The fight decision would go Vettori's way in a super close fight, which I would not have been opposed being a draw. Overall, this was a competitive fight which just never hit boiling point, unfortunately for the fans. The next fight would be similar to the fight before it in another competitive fight between Casey O'Neill and Jennifer Maia. This was a competitive fight with Maia being the counter striker and O'Neill pushing the pace. Unfortunately for O'Neill, Maia's counter striking was too much for O'Neill to handle, with Maia winning the decision on the judges' scorecard. This was a close fight and hopefully O'Neill can make a comeback in the division, and also let's see if Maia can work herself up to another title shot. The next fight, another London familiar, Gunnar Nelson would face off against Brian Barberena. Both men said they would put on a show, but that never happened. We did see some fun action though. The fight would be fought on the feet, but then Gunnar Nelson secured the takedown and then locked in the armbar to secure the brilliant win. This was brilliant for a perennial contender and a legend of the welterweight division. The co-main event, we were promised violence, and that's what we got with Justin Gaethje and Rafael Fiziev. This fight was fought solely on the feet in a back and forth battle on the feet. The first round, Fiziev seemed too much for Justin Gaethje, with brilliant speed in his striking and especially his kicks. The second round, Justin Gaethje was better and seemed to steal the round in a back and forth round. The third round would be up for grabs, with Fiziev being brilliant at the beginning of the round, but Gaethje stole the end of the round with brilliant uppercuts landing at will. The fight would be close and would go Gaethje's way on the scorecard in a close fight, which wouldn't have surprised me if it was a draw, which it was on one of the judges' scorecards. Overall, this was a great fight, but it just never hit fifth gear and turned into the war we all wanted. The main event saw the trilogy and final fight of a fantastic rivalry in welterweight history. Leon Edwards would defend his title on home soil against the ultra-competitive former champion Kamaru Usman. The fight would be competitive throughout, with Leon Edwards being the sharper and faster in the striking department, being the counter-striker, and Kamaru Usman being the pressure fighter. The first two rounds, Leon would be brilliant with his striking and movement, and even takedown defense, winning the first two rounds in many people's eyes. The third round, Kamaru would start brilliantly and get a takedown, but Leon Edwards got back to his feet. But as he got up, Kamaru would go for another takedown, but Leon grabbed the fence, preventing the takedown and having a point deducted. The rest of the third round, Leon Edwards ended up dominating, while showing great takedown defense. The championship rounds would be close, with Usman putting on the pressure once again and putting his foot on the gas, but Leon showed brilliant takedown defense again and would be brilliant landing counter strikes and leg kicks, and even head kicks, and would overall land the more significant strikes. The fight went to the judges' scorecards, with Leon showing how much he has improved since the last fight, and showing he is the rightful king of the welterweight division, in a close and competitive fight, but the right man definitely won. The main event brought a great end to the pay-per-view for UK fans, but overall this card was lackluster. Even the highly anticipated co-main event, where we were promised violence, only ever hit 4th gear. It never really hit 5th gear and that fight of the year territory excitement we all expected. And surprisingly, with the card not really delivering, the crowd was also lackluster, compared to the last two UFC fight nights we had last year in London, where the fans were electric all night. This was one of the worst UK MMA crowds ever. I even said it in my last UFC review. If the crowd delivers, we could be in for a special night, but unfortunately they never delivered. That is probably because the hardcore MMA fans were priced out of going to this one, with the crowd being full of more casual people who wanted to experience a big event who weren't really MMA fans. Overall, if we were to grade this pay-per-view, it gets a C-. Overall, a lackluster pay-per-view which could have really been bolstered with more exciting talent on the main card, and maybe even a Paddy Pimblett fight, but unfortunately I believe he is injured at the moment. I'll let the UFC slide on that one. Overall, you won't go back to watch this pay-per-view, only the hardcore MMA fans will watch the high-level main event between two of the best welterweights of all time. Did you enjoy the video? Let us know down in the comments below. What did you think of UFC 286? And did you think it was a good pay-per-view, or did it under-deliver? Let us know down in the comments below. Leave a like if you've enjoyed the video, and subscribe for more fight content coming soon. If you enjoy football content, check out the football franchise for football content on there regarding the Champions League, Premier League and much more. We hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll catch you in the next one.